Hello, everyone. How's it going? It's 12 o'clock now, but I'll go ahead and wait a couple of minutes to see if we'll have any late stragglers join in on the meeting. But it's great to see all of your wonderful name boxes on our grid screen. My name is Shondon. I'm a part of Cobb Water's Watershed Stewardship Program. So we do environmental outreach throughout the county for schools, community groups, educating the community about our water resources, about the environment, and about our water infrastructure more broadly. And so if you're here for this presentation, you're really going to get that infrastructure side. So this is definitely one of our key presentations that we put on. So I'll go ahead and talk more about that later. Until then, can you all give me either a thumbs up if your camera's on, if you can hear me, and if you don't have your camera on, if you want to pull up that chat box somewhere at the bottom, there should be a chat bubble, or if not, you should see an ellipses, 3 dots. If you click that, there should be a chat function, and you can just type yes or no in the chat to let me know that you can hear me clearly and that you can see me clearly. Oh, nice. Lots of good thumbs up. So like I said, we'll give it about another minute and then we'll dive right in. Nice to see you all. I'll give you a warning. If you are eating in this lunch and learn, around like minute 12:35, I suggest you not eat for about maybe 5 minutes, you know, just to give you that warning. Now, cool, I'm getting responses. As always, too, I'll go ahead and introduce these. Always have a tech person behind the scenes, making sure all the video and network components are working well. Today, I have Chrissy with me. She is teching the program. So if you want to go ahead and say hi to Chrissy in the chat. If you have any questions throughout the program, feel free to type those in. I will try my best to answer those at certain points throughout the presentation. And if you have any issues, if you type those in the chat, as well, she can handle, or at least try to handle, as much as that can for you. So I can focus mainly on teaching you all. But it looks like it's now 12:02, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started with the presentation. So hello again. This is our wastewater presentation. So the ultimate goal of this presentation is that by the end, by 12:45, to hopefully give you a brief but comprehensive overview of how your water system works. And when I say water system, I don't specifically mean the utility aspect, although that is what we're going to cover most of the time, but also sort of the natural aspect of how the relationship between our society, our infrastructure, as it relates to our natural networks of water as well, our streams, creeks, ponds, and lakes. Okay. If you were just like me about less than 2 years ago, actually, your primary interactions with the water system are probably through a customer service person, or if you have like a body of water in your yard or a property like a stream or a pond, you might have other interactions with the water system. Most people just generally don't understand how their distribution networks as it pertains to water operate. And so that's the whole point of this presentation, is to give you that background knowledge so you can take it with you. I always compare it to knowing like car maintenance. Like, you don't need to probably know basic car maintenance. You might be fine, but in a case of an emergency, you'd rather have that knowledge. And so it kind of works the same with the water system. There's lots of roles that you have as a citizen, as a resident, that if you don't know those roles, you can actually get tripped up. And so hopefully we can resolve those issues now. The way today's going to work, if you want to take me split screen, please. There are 4 parts to this presentation. I always start off my presentations with a primer. It stinks if you're talking about anything and you don't know the background. And so I'm going to be bouncing around a bunch of different topics. And I just want to make sure we all are on the same platform before I do that we all have the same background knowledge before I get into the details. And so we're going to have a general discussion about water as a natural resource for about 10 minutes or so. After that, we'll go into a section we call Cobb's water story. that goes into the infrastructure side. So how does water get from nature to your lives and then back from waste back to nature? And how does that cycle sort of interact with us and you at the water system? So that's kind of the meat of this whole presentation, where you're going to get that infrastructure, society, nature knowledge. The third part is going to focus specifically on you. So I want to make this clear. Whenever I say you all, I am including myself, but I'm speaking from the perspective of the water system. I'm an inanimate object in this presentation. So when I say you, I mean community members. And so I'm also involved in everything that I'm talking about, but I'm just trying to speak from the water system's perspective. So we're going to talk about specifically where our role stops and your role begins in sort of the maintenance of our water quality more generally. And then if we have time, this is sort of a sub part. We're not going to go into this if we don't have time, but I like to show a little love to the other divisions of the water system that you don't typically see. So we'll actually go into some of the other really cool and vital aspects of the water system that you probably don't know about, and talk about what they do. And so you get a better idea of where all the money and resources that we use are going into. And so again, if we have time, we'll touch on that, but definitely the first three topics. So in between those topics, we'll also have questions. So make sure you type your questions as I go, and I'll answer those as we transition from topic to topic. But on that note, let's go ahead and go into the primer. Thank you. And so we'll start with water, right? Literally, it's so basic. It's like the first thing you almost learn about nature when you're like elementary school. It's like water, water cycle. But I feel like water is so basic that we tend to forget how important it is and how much we use it. In fact, we can use up to 2,000 gallons of water, or I should say we can consume up to 2,000 gallons of water per day to sustain our daily habit. 2,000. This is something that's been studied by multiple groups and scientific institutions like across the country, and the average is getting around 2,000, right? So that's about half of a milk truck, maybe a little less than half. So if you live in a household of 2 to 3, you can expect that the milk truck in the photo that I have here, that's pretty much how much water is being extracted from the natural world to sustain our natural to sustain our daily habits. And so if you're like me and you're inquisitive, you're like, that's a lot, and you might be really interested in figuring out why that is the case. So that's what we're going to talk about in this primer, about where's all this water going to. So I have a pie chart here. We're going to use that to represent the proportions of water that we're using in the US specifically. And it generally breaks down into 3 major groups that I have here. The largest chunk, the dark blue color that you can see there, most of that is going to food and agriculture. Okay, so that's the production of the animals, of the crops that we eat, processing all of those foods, the facilities that are doing the processing, all of that kind of falls under food and agriculture. And so the best example I have is the hamburger example, which actually made news not too long ago as sort of a significant fun fact. But most people know that a typical hamburger can take about 600 gallons of water to produce. A lot of water, right? And so if you want to know where that's coming from, most of that's actually going into the cow, right? So the cow needs to consume lots of grains, and so it takes water to grow those grains. The cow also needs water to consume for itself and for health purposes too. So it takes about 500 gallons of water just to create that cow that is making that beef. And then the rest of the water is going into the processing of the meat, right? For the facility. So the machinery that's being used sometimes requires water to clean it. It takes water to cool that machinery down. So water is being used even in the production side of it too, not just in the actual animal itself. And so combined, it takes about 600 gallons of water extracted from the environment to make that hamburger. A slice of bread works similarly. It's made of grains and wheat, right? So it takes about 11 gallons of water to grow enough grains to make sort of one slice. So a loaf of bread is about 100 gallons of water. And so right off the bat, you can see how we hit this 2,000 gallon estimate, because we're not talking about direct usage only, like not showers, not bathtubs, not sinks specifically. And we're also talking about the things that go into the products and services that we use very frequently. And so this brings me to a favorite game that I love to play with the middle school kids that I teach. It's kind of like The Price is Right. So I'm going to below put up some images of products. And I want you all to type in the chat. I want you to guess how many gallons of water it takes to produce that product. And we'll start off with something easy, something I like. Oranges. So for one orange, I want you all to give a guess on how much water it takes to produce that orange. Oh, wait a few minutes.
So Laurel said
250.
250. Said 200.
200?
Oh, she meant 25.
Okay, so we got 250, now changed to 25, 200s. I will say the 25 is much closer. It takes about 13 gallons of water producing orange, which is pretty good. That's a pretty solid number. It makes sense for orange grows on trees, right? But that's specifically just for the fruit. If you're talking about like orange juice, a gallon of that takes about 59 gallons. So that's where you're bringing in like the production side of it, the powering, right? And we'll talk about more about the production side of things later because there's a lot that goes into that. I have a gallon of milk. I know it's like a carton, but we'll say it's a gallon. A gallon of milk. What do we got? So this is different from the orange, right? Because the orange was just like the byproduct of the plant itself. But milk takes a bit of processing. So
Laurel got 800 AM.
I'm getting lots of 60s, around the 100s. I think someone said 300, right? Cool. Yeah, so this one's actually higher than you think. About 880 gallons. Now, I will say this varies depending on the milk, right? So we're talking about refined dairy milk here. Like it's gonna vary if you're like using seed milks, like almond milk or something like that. Like it's gonna vary. So we're talking about refined dairy milk, 880 gallons. And again, most of that is just caring for the animal that's producing that milk. And then a lot actually goes into the production of it too, the processing, the cooking, the creation of the final product. And then you got to take into account the container, manufacturing the container to hold the milk. It requires water to do that too, which we'll talk about later, like plastics and papers and stuff. So really cool. I'm going to skip through the rest because I don't want to spend too much time on that. But just the more eggs, roughly 53 gallons of water, right? Coffee, a cup of coffee, about 37 gallons of water, right? And so we haven't even hit dinner yet. And so you can see right now, like how we're getting creeping up to that 2,000 gallons a day number. It just takes a lot of water to grow the stuff that we eat and consume. It's just a sort of a fact of life, right? And so that's the biggest chunk. We're going to move on to the second large expenditure, which is energy and transportation. So by energy, I'm not talking about hydropower. Like that is a little bit, but most of it actually goes into the production of fossil fuels. And so like using electricity, usually electricity requires fossil fuels, and the creation of fossil fuels requires water. Now, this is something you're going to have to look online about because it's a very deep conversation on how water is used. But needless to say, they need a lot of water. I can provide you one example though. I do know in oil fields, when that oil is being extracted and refined, there's a pressure loss that happens in the field, which is a problem. And so to offset that pressure loss, they actually they pump lots of water into those fields just to add more pressure to offset that pressure that was lost during the production and refinement of that oil. So that's just one example. The water is used in the production of fuels, oils, other types of just power sources in general, very frequently. And so think about your life. How much electricity? I mean, right now, right? Like the stream is using lots of power. And so there's lots of water that's being used to produce the fuels to make that power. Think about high demand facilities like water treatment facilities that I don't want to make sure that, we're not left out. Water treatment facilities use tons and tons of power too, right? Universities, factories, pretty much power's being used. And of course, we got to drive everywhere. And so it takes water to make all of those fuels, to make those sources, right? And so that's where that large expenditure comes from. So we'll have kind of more topics in the future that kind of touch a little bit on those topics, just to give you an overview. The last little expenditure I just grouped together as direct usage at homes and small businesses, right? So this is the water you're directly using: showers, washing your hands. If you're at a restaurant, you're using lots of water, right? For cleaning stuff, cleaning food, cleaning plates, pretty much anything you think, toilets. Like direct usage, like you are turning on and off that water. It counts for the last little sliver of water usage. And cumulatively, that is where we hit our 2,000 gallons a day mark in the US at least. So now that you understand that, we're almost done with our primer here. Let's go ahead and let's keep that statistic in our head. Like roughly 2,000 gallons of water is extracted to sustain those habits that we have. Now let's look at the container, if you will, the jug, which holds all of that water for us, our wonderful, beautiful Earth, right? Which is conveniently 2/3 water, right? So our Earth is made of 2/3 of water. Unfortunately, though, most of that water is not usable for those goods and services that we just talked about. 97% of it is salt water. We will not talk about desalination today, but I will just say that it's not at the point where we want it to be yet to make it a feasible solution. Plus, Cobb County is landlocked, so desalination does nothing for us anyway. But it's just not at the point of history the science isn't up on that yet for it to be a viable, sustainable solution. So effectively not usable. So at least 3% water left. Of that 3%, 2% is trapped in glaciers or is otherwise inaccessible. So we can't use that. It's more inaccessible than the salt water. Rather take that. So that only leaves 1% of water, of fresh water available to supply all of those needs that we just talked about, all those needs that we have, right? And so divide that by every country, every county, every state, city, right? You can see there's not that much fresh water to go around. And so if we bring up that 2,000 gallons of water a day statistic, you can see that that's now more critical. Like it puts things in perspective, the sheer amount that we're using versus how much is available. And so before humans came around, nature had all of that water, right? Like it found a equilibrium. It found a stability with that 1% of fresh water that it had before humans. But of course, as we develop, we need to continually use that water. That is where the problem is. And so that brings us to the second part of our presentation. This is where the Cobb County water system and similar utilities come into play. Because we are sort of like, you can call us the mediators, the liaisons. We're like the middleman, right? We're balancing the needs of the community as we need the water to live our lives, to live happy, healthy, sustainable lives, right? Versus the needs of the environment, because without it, we no longer have natural resources. And water is kind of one of the critical points, features of our natural resources, right? And so as the water system, we have a bunch of responsibilities that in relation to balancing that relationship. And so that's what we're going to talk about, how we tackle that task of balancing that relationship, getting that water to you, and making sure that the waste that's generated doesn't impact the environment so we can continue to benefit from the environment. Whew. That brings us to our Q&A session. So that was kind of a primer. If you have did anybody type any questions up to now? I'll take the lack of questions so far as an indication that I'm doing a good job. But if you do have a question, I'm just going to move on for the sake of time. But if you do have it, like type it, and I'll just answer it the next time I get to the Q&A. So keep them coming. Cool. You want to make me tiny again? All right. So it's a monumental task getting that water to you. Like people are spread out across Cobb County. We got mountains. We got like kind of swampy areas, right? Lots of hills. Like it is a monumental task getting that water to you and balancing that relationship with the needs of the environment as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about in Cobb's water story. We're going to talk about how we accomplish that task. And so I have here a map of Cobb. Oh, before I do that though, sorry. I do want to say that that 2,000 gallons of water is universal, right? And so most of the products that we use, those animals, the meat, the vegetables, a lot of that is actually imported. So that's not, the water that's used to create those doesn't come from our local natural resources. That's coming from places in different countries or different states or just different parts of this state. So I guess for the rest of this presentation, we're really focusing on that small slither, the direct usage, like the water that you're turning on and turning off in Cobb County. Not to say the 2,000 isn't important, it's just not as directly relevant as far as Cobb County's resources go. So we're talking about 100 gallons per day on average per person is how much is being consumed. So back to my map. This is a map of Cobb County. Just to give you a perspective here of where everything is, you can see the cities, the major cities, Marietta, Powder Springs, Kennesaw, Ackworth, in case you don't know where you are in this blank map of Cobb County. There are about 280,000 households in Cobb County and about 20,000 businesses that need water. Yes, there are other entities like schools and stuff, but let's keep it simple. So about 280,000 households need water, 20,000 businesses. And so the first task is getting that water to those locations across the county, right? So we pull the water from the source. Our sources in Cobb County are Lake Allatoona and the Chattahoochee River, Lake Allatoona being in the top northwest of the county and the Chattahoochee being our eastern border. So that's where the water is being pulled. That's where our natural resources are coming from. And that water is treated and delivered to you through a network of pipes. Now, Cobb Water does not treat the drinking water that we are delivering. That's actually done by a separate entity called Cobb County Marietta Water Authority. I have it on the PowerPoint. I know it's weird, I know it's confusing, but we are two separate groups, two separate entities. They treat the water and we buy the water from them wholesale and distribute it to our customers throughout the county. Right? And so we do partner with them though. We work together to make sure that the water is meeting standards, and those standards are set by the EPA. Like tons of different contaminants are regulated, like up to 90, I believe, or even more than 90 are regulated. And so there are strict standards that drinking water has to meet. And we partner with Cobb County Marietta Water Authority to make sure that our water is meeting those standards. But they are the ones treating it and we are distributing it. And so we get the water from them and we use our network of pipes to distribute it to your homes and schools and places of work, right? Every year, we pump about 23 billion gallons of water. So just to give you an estimate of our impact on our local water resources, it's about 23 billion gallons of water per year, which is still a lot. So then we use it in whatever ways, right? We don't have to talk about what goes down the drain, but you know what goes down the drain, right? So it goes down drains, it goes down sinks, it goes down toilets, right? It's waste. And that waste is not healthy for the environment, right? So we need to treat that water. We have to make sure it meets a certain standard for environmental health before we put it back into the source, right? And so we have 4 wastewater treatment facilities or reclamation facilities. We have 4 of those spread out throughout the county. And they treat the water. So that's something that we are responsible for, Cobb Water. We are responsible for treating that wastewater, making sure that it meets the EPA environmental standards, and then we pump it right back to the source, right? Because water isn't infinite, and so we have to continue to reuse the water. So we pump it right back to the sources that we found it, Lake Allatoona and downstream Chattahoochee River. And that's ultimately how our system works in a nutshell, right? We pull the water, Lake Allatoona from Lake Allatoona to Chattahoochee River. Cobb Marietta treats it. We buy it and distribute it to you. You use it. And then through waste, we treat it and put it right back to where we ultimately got it. Right? Now, in a perfect world, in a perfect system, that's where this would end. We would be done with this conversation. But we are not in a perfect world. We are not in a perfect system. And so there are some other little details involved in that distribution of water that I want to talk about that's relevant for this presentation. The first is the pipe network, right? So over 3,000 miles of drinking water pipes and 2,500 miles of sewer lines are used to take this water. So they're separate. We don't use the same pipes for drinking water and sewer water. So cumulatively over 5,500 miles of just piping, right? Infrastructure doesn't last forever, right? Eventually, over time, it needs to be replaced. So we have like, a team of people, a small army really, of people who are responsible for maintaining those, monitoring those, making repairs. And we do that because we want to make sure our system is working efficiently, right? And usually when things go wrong in the piping system, it's usually the result of, not always, but it's often a result of you, of us, the customer, right? One common reason that repairs happen is due to putting the wrong things down the drain, right? And so, again, this is probably around the time when you want to stop eating. And so, what commonly happens, there's a phenomenon we call fatbergs. Fatbergs, I have a photo right here, is what happens when oils and grease inside the pipes bind with other products in the pipes, like foods or paper towels or wet wipes. They bond and they basically solidify and clog the pipes. And once that happens, it takes a lot of money, takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of manpower to fix those, right? And so if you follow us on social media, which you should, Cobb Water on Facebook, Tappy Turtle on Twitter, Cobb County Water on Instagram, you often see that we post lots of stuff about not flushing things down, well, not putting things down the drain and not flushing different stuff, right? And I have an example post below me too. Our pipes, our wastewater treatment facilities are not designed to handle all of that. They're not trash cans, right? And so these fatbergs can be really expensive and really costly. And so ultimately that cost will end up on the consumer, the customer, person in the water, right? So if I go back to that list, actually, like all of that, one key thing that we talk about is wet wipes. There are lots of labeling on wet wipes that say they're flushable. That's not necessarily the case. I think almost all flushable wet wipes are actually not flushable at all. They do not dissolve. And so they are one of the key contributors to these fatbergs that get created. Specifically on the fog part, so fog, F-O-G, stands for fats, oils, and grease. Do not put those down your drain if you can help it. Well, actually, not if you can help it. Just don't put it down the drain. It's better if you just put them in a separate can container and just let it solidify, and you can just throw it away. But if you're lucky, like the fog will make it to the municipal system before it clogs, but ultimately, like that cost will come back on you. But if you're unlucky, like that fatberg will happen in your own plumbing, and then it's a huge problem specifically for you. And so just don't do that. It doesn't make anybody happy. Yeah. Two more facets of this. I'll zoom through this, but I found it quite interesting. I have here a statistic of Cobb Water's population growth since the 1970s, I believe, 1980s. You can see at the bottom there, from 1980 till now, we've effectively doubled our population size, right? So that means there's lots more water being used and a lot more waste. And so to actually, about a decade or so ago, we had a huge problem in Cobb County, mainly that we didn't have enough capacity in our sewer lines to accommodate the amount of waste that was entering the sewer. And so there were two huge projects that were launched in the past, the Chattahoochee Tunnel and the large, I think it was the South Cobb Tunnel, these huge tunnels to basically add more capacity to our sewer lines. So I bring this up just to show you like sort of the engineering feats that we in Cobb Water are also involved in as well, to basically facilitate the larger population sizes, the larger amount of waste that's created. These two huge tunnels were created to better accommodate that. And so I have a picture, look it up online. It's the kid in me, but if you look up at the bottom there, I have a picture of the drill that was used to drill that tunnel. And that is amazing. I suggest you look those up on like video or something. Like it's just a marvel to me looking at that thing work and just like burrow through the ground at such a deep level. So check that out. But lots of like really large stuff happening. Thank you. I'll just finish off with these last two things because I'm rambling on a little bit. I will say that the waste that we generate as typical consumers isn't really that bad for the most part. But for industrial facilities, for large businesses, for large factories and such, like the waste that they generate is really nasty and really bad. It has tons of stuff that's not good for the environment. And our wastewater treatment facilities are not designed to treat those chemicals. I didn't actually talk about that, but our wastewater treatment facilities are designed, we say the 3 Ps, like they're designed to treat organic human waste. So pee, poop, and then the last exception is toilet paper, right? So only flush the 3 Ps. Anything that goes outside of natural human organic waste is a potential problem and can actually go through the water system without being treated or cleaned and enter our natural water, right? It's just that we aren't equipped to deal with all these different chemicals. We're just trying to deal with the human waste that's generated. So in the case of industrial waste, that's a huge concern. And so we also monitor them, and they actually have to fulfill certain regulations in their water. They actually have to treat it before they send it to us. They can't just flush it down the toilet or pipe it to us. They actually have to treat their water first before sending it to us, so we don't have to deal with that problem. So we also are involved in that too. That's it. Last statement, don't flush medicine. Again, as a consumer, you should know what you should be doing with your water system. And again, just the 3 Ps down the toilet: pee, poop, and toilet paper. Medicines have chemicals in them that pass through the water system as well. And those can actually wreak havoc in the environment too. And we don't have the ability to treat many of those contaminants in medicine. So make sure you dispose of your medicines properly. I suggest you check out our YouTube page because we have YouTube videos on things like that and household hazardous waste. Moving on. Cool. So that is generally all that's involved for the most part. All the major things that's involved in getting that water to you from nature and getting it back to nature in a form that allows us to have a sustainable cycle of treatment. So with all of that being said, do we have any questions that popped up? We'll have a Q&A, quick Q&A real quick. Awesome. So again, I'll take that as a good sign that there are no questions. And we'll move on to sort of the more critical part of this presentation. And that's where our role ends and yours begins. You want to make me tiny again? Thank you. Cool. So in that large system of water distribution, right, we take it from the source, we distribute it to you. Eventually that water will make its way to your home. And it'll pass something called a water meter, and we'll put it down there. A water meter, which measures how much water is being pumped to your home. Once that water passes that water meter, from that point on, the plumbing, the pipes, the water itself, all of that actually is your responsibility, all the way until it reaches the sewer tap outside your house, right? And so we often say that you become the operator of your own personal water treatment system, of your own water system, once the water passes the water meter, right? And so you want to have a good understanding of your plumbing, right? And understand your plumbing fixtures. We are going to have future topics on this specifically, like things you can do to make sure that your personal water system, your home plumbing is operating effectively, efficiently. But I'll just give the highlights here. But the main thing is just like take care of your pipes, right? Make sure your pipes are good. You want to be checking for leaks like every month, if not every week. If you get hints of a leak, like you see water spots, if you have like a moldy smell, like these are not things that you want to like sit on. Like these things you want to handle like very quickly as soon as you identify them, and you would kind of want to be on a constant lookout for them. And so make sure you maintain your pipes. If you have a frequent pipe issue, like you consistently getting leaks or you have like really large bursts, that's probably related to a pressure issue. And so you can actually buy like these pressure meters. I actually have a photo below me. You can buy like these pressure meters at the hardware store. They're pretty cheap, like somewhere between $10 to $20. And you just kind of put them on your water outlet and turn it on. And you can measure your PSI, the pressure, your water pressure, and you want it to be 80 or lower. And so if you are having consistent water issues, you want to make sure you handle that pressure part first before you do the actual fixing of the leak. Otherwise, it's just going to keep happening back and forth. Also, another issue is if you use those heavy strength like drain cleaners. We talk about that during the household hazardous waste presentation on our YouTube. If you use those drain cleaners, like that can actually corrode your pipes, right? So use more healthier versions to clean your pipes. Like there are manual things you can get. Like I don't know if they're called spiders. I forget what the name for them are. Drain snakes. Yeah, I don't know where I got spiders from. There are drain snakes. You can like stick them in there and like pull out all the gunk. There are ways to do that without destroying your pipes. Another common issue is just, you can see this is clearly a common problem. I'm just putting the wrong things down the drain. So don't put any food and stuff down the toilet. Avoid the fog, the fats, oils, grease. I guess it's frogs now. R stands for rags. So frogs, avoid the frogs, the food, right? Like just put the right things down the drain, mainly just water and any other cleaning liquid you may be using, and you'll be fine. Two more, water heaters. Okay, this is something that I had to learn the hard way when I was younger, but water heaters actually aren't regulated as far as their water quality goes. The water that passes through a water heater is not potable. You should not be using that for drinking. You should not be using that for eating or cooking for any of that. You should only be using it for showering, for bathing yourself, just general hygienic purposes. If I have another picture down here, if you've seen some of those actually being drained, you'll see firsthand how nasty some of those can be. Not all of them are going to be as bad as on the photo. I just found one to make a point. But there's bacteria that's definitely in there. There's other microbes, there's metals, there could be sediment. Do not drink the hot water. If you need hot water, just boil it. That's the safest way to do that. So definitely do that. That'll make me feel better. And then the last thing is be aware of winterizing your pipes. Again, we will have more specific lunch and learns on how to like sort of care for your personal water system at home. And in fact, we have a lunch and learn in January, I believe, from our very own Angie Marcus, who is going to be talking about winterizing your pipes. So if that's something that you are interested in and knowing about and learning more about how to properly care for your pipes during the winter, be on the lookout for that lunch and learn. But yeah, just make sure you do take care of your pipes in the winter so you don't have these issues that I have in the photo.
So,
Any questions?
Dan McCoy, who works for one of the sites that has some what and he provides demonstrations and their own presentations on the site.
Yes. So our very own Jennifer McCoy of our Communications and Education Division, hi Jen, thanks for tuning in. She mentioned that there are actually plenty of resources that we, Cobb County Water System, provide to you all for free to help maintain like your personal water system and improve water quality. And specifically, what did you say the list was, just so I get it right?
So
You can get drain snakes for free, pressure gauges. I know we have other water efficiency equipment. So we have things like aerators for your sink. We have like little timers for your shower. We have tons of stuff. We have tablets that you can use to check to see if your toilet's leaking. Yeah, just and this kind of brings me to my overall point too. Like that's what we're here for, right? Like we're not just saying do all this stuff and everybody will be better off for it. Like like reach out to us. More often than not, like we have not only free stuff that will help you accomplish whatever task you are, we can at least point you in the right direction for whatever water issue you may have, whether it's like related to plumbing or related to like the environment too, if you have like a stream or pond in your yard. So if those are stuff you're interested in, like our indoor water efficiency kits or like those drain snakes, not spiders, drain snakes, any of that stuff, feel free to contact us. Our website is cobbstreams.org, like Cobb County, and streams like the river, cobbstreams.org. You can go there. And you can also email us at water_RSVP@cobbcounty.org. We can just type that in the chat for you. So feel free to contact us. Cool. And on that note, if you want to take me full screen, thank you. That covers the presentation. So like I said, that there was a fourth component that I do if I have time. That was kind of a last minute add-on because I felt like it would be kind of valuable to talk about, more about where all the money's going to and where all the resources are going to. But this is the crux of our presentation. So what I'll say is I will give about 3 minutes. If you have any questions about anything I just said, anything related to what I said, please feel free to type those in the chat. That is what we're here for. Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sitting here silently because I'm waiting to see if Chrissy gets any questions. But we'll give it about another minute or so, and if not, then we'll kind of move on and close. But I will say thank you all so much for being here. Hopefully you all learned a lot from this presentation. It's always hard to gauge what our community members do and do not know. So if you want to go ahead and right now, Chrissy is going to drop a feedback form link. It's quick, takes like 3 minutes to do. If you want to fill that out and submit it back to us, you can just click it, like a seamless, no, it's a Google form. Fill that out. It just helps us to know, like, better improve our programs. This is the first time we've did this for our virtual lunch and learn. And so it'll be really valuable to know, like, if there were things that we covered that you felt like you already knew, so it was kind of a waste of your time, or things you did want to know. So always mention the good stuff too. Things that you found out about that you thought were important to know about, all of that. So please fill that feedback form out. It should be in the chat now. And yeah, follow us on social media too. I mentioned that. Cobb Water on Facebook, Happy Turtle on Twitter, and Cobb County Water. Since we do have some time, I do want to backtrack then, because there was one little bit I skipped over because I was scared I was going to go over. So I have a minute left. If you want to take me back to picture in picture. Because poor Adam of our stormwater management team, Cobb Water extends beyond your plumbing, right? Like we play a role in the environmental aspect too, mainly when it comes to the management of Cobb County stormwater. And so water, as we mentioned already, is amazing. We love it. It provides all these things to us, but it also is bad for property values, especially if you are a realtor. But if you own property, you don't want water in your property. It's really bad, right? So we have a whole network of storm drains, of culverts, of just infrastructure built to divert that water away from our property and to our homes. Away from our property and to our natural water sources, our streams, our creeks, our rivers, our ponds. And so we call that system, that network of culverts and storm drains, we call those municipal separate storm sewer systems, or MS4s, MS4 for short. We also play a role in maintaining that too. So making sure that, during the raining season like we just had, every week isn't like a flood apocalypse, and we have to canoe to work every day. And so we maintain a portion of all of those infrastructure things. And So again, those are all future topics that we'll talk about in future Lunch and Learns. And so on that note, I will finish off by again saying thank you all so much for being here. I'm sure there are other things you could have did during your lunchtime. I'm glad that you're here. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you take this stuff and actually share it with those in your lives too, because that's another way that this knowledge gets passed on. And so by sharing this, you can also help contribute to our water quality and, just help foster a better sort of coexistence between us, nature, our natural resources. And again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about anything we talked about. Like, we're here to help. So don't be afraid. And on that note, I will sign off. Goodbye, everyone. Please fill out that feedback form. And we actually will not be having a Lunch and Learn in December. So you all get a break from us for a month. But we'll be back in January for winterizing your pipes, I believe. And yeah, have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much for attending, and goodbye.